Captain Daniel Foster stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, watching the stars stretch across the view screen like scattered diamonds on black velvet. His ship had been traveling for 3 weeks now, chasing a signal that should not exist, pursuing a mystery that had haunted humanity for 60 years. The comm station beeped softly, and Dr. Lisa Martinez looked up from her analysis console, her dark eyes reflecting the glow of ancient symbols she had been studying since they left Earth orbit 3 weeks ago, symbols that matched perfectly with artifacts found buried in the red soil of Mars. Artifacts that had been locked away in classified vaults, hidden from public knowledge for decades. "Captain, the signal is getting stronger," she said, her voice carrying a mixture of excitement and nervousness that made Foster turn from the view screen to face her directly. "We should reach the source point in approximately 6 hours if we maintain current velocity." Commander Jake Peterson moved closer to the navigation display, his military training evident in every calculated step he took across the bridge. He had been skeptical about this mission from the beginning, questioning why Earth Command would dedicate their fastest exploration vessel to chase what many considered an elaborate hoax or natural phenomenon. "Sir, I still think we should have brought additional escort ships," Peterson said, though his tone suggested he knew the argument was already lost, that the decision had been made weeks ago in closed-door meetings he was not privileged to attend. "If this signal is really from the same source as the Mars incident, we have no idea what we might encounter out here." Foster nodded slowly, understanding his second officer's concerns completely. They were valid concerns, rational fears based on humanity's limited experience with whatever had visited them all those years ago. During the darkest hour of the Mars colony crisis that almost ended human expansion into space before it truly began, Dr. Helen Carter, the communications specialist who had been monitoring the signal since its discovery 4 months ago, cleared her throat to get everyone's attention. She had been the one who first noticed the mathematical patterns embedded in what initially appeared to be random cosmic radiation, patterns that sang with purpose and intelligence. "Captain, you all need to understand something," Helen began, pulling up holographic displays that filled the air between them with cascading numbers and frequency analyzers. "This signal is not just calling us to a location. It is teaching us, showing us mathematical proofs and scientific principles that we barely understand, offering knowledge the same way those Mars artifacts did 60 years ago." Lisa stood up from her console, moving to stand beside the holographic display, her fingers dancing through the light as she manipulated the data to show comparison models. She had spent the last 7 years of her life studying the Mars artifacts, becoming Earth's foremost expert on technology that humanity could barely comprehend, let alone replicate in 2087. "The Mars colony was dying," Lisa said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of historical tragedy that had been kept secret from most of humanity for generations. The atmospheric processors failed simultaneously across all 3 colony domes, 10,000 people, at maybe 72 hours of breathable air remaining. And Earth was 8 months away, even with our fastest ships at that time. Foster had heard the story before, but only in fragments, only in classified briefings that came with security clearances higher than most admirals possessed. The full truth about humanity's first major colony crisis was known to very few, protected by layers of government secrecy that seemed almost paranoid in their thoroughness. Unknown vessels appeared in Mars orbit on the second day of the crisis. Lisa continued, her voice growing stronger as she recounted the history she had dedicated her career to understanding. "No one knew where they came from or how they got there. Our sensors never detected their approach. Our communications received no response to desperate hail attempts. Our entire colony simply watched as 3 massive ships took up position above the largest dome." Jake crossed his arms, his expression showing the same doubt that most people felt when hearing this story for the first time. The same rational skepticism that demanded proof for extraordinary claims. But Lisa was prepared. She had spent years gathering that proof, assembling evidence that could not be easily dismissed. They dropped supply containers, she said, pulling up grainy video footage from colony security cameras, images that had been locked away in military archives for 6 decades. 7 containers, each one containing atmospheric processing equipment that was decades beyond our technology, along with detailed instructions written in 17 different Earth languages, instructions that were simple enough for our engineers to follow, precise enough to save every single colonist's life. The footage showed colonists in emergency suits rushing to retrieve the containers, their movements frantic with desperation and hope mixed together in equal measure. The ships above remained silent, massive, and elegant, their hulls reflecting Mars's red surface like mirrors that refused to reveal what lay behind them. They stayed in orbit for 3 days while our people installed the new equipment, Lisa explained, advancing the footage to show the atmospheric processors humming to life, glowing with soft blue light that must have seemed like salvation to the colonists who had been facing slow suffocation. The moment our air became stable again, the moment the crisis ended, they left no communication, no demands for payment or gratitude, no explanation for why they helped us or who they were. Helen added her own analysis to the discussion, pulling up comparative data that showed undeniable similarities between the Mars artifacts and the current signal they were pursuing across deep space. The mathematical structures were identical. The teaching methodology matched perfectly. The intent seemed clear, even if the purpose remained mysterious. Earth Command classified the entire incident, Foster said, speaking what everyone already knew, stating the obvious conclusion that explained decades of official silence. They were afraid of how humanity would react to knowing we were not alone, afraid of creating dependency on unknown benefactors, afraid of what it meant that someone could reach Mars without us detecting them. Lisa nodded sharply, her expression showing frustration with decisions made long before she entered the field of xenorchaeology. Choices that had shaped humanity's development in ways both obvious and subtle. The Mars technology had been studied in secret, reverse-engineered slowly, incorporated into human designs without public acknowledgement of its true origin. But they left those artifacts behind, she said, gesturing at the symbols rotating in holographic space before them. Not just the atmospheric processors, but information storage devices. Teaching tools that we are still learning to fully understand decades later. They wanted us to grow, to develop, to become more than we were without becoming dependent on gifts we did not earn. The bridge fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications, considered what it meant that their mysterious benefactors might be returning after 60 years of absolute silence. Foster felt the weight of command pressing down on him, the responsibility of first contact falling onto his shoulders whether he was ready for it or not. 6 hours until we reached the signal source, he said finally, his voice carrying the authority that came with his rank and the uncertainty that came with venturing into the completely unknown. All departments, prepare for potential first contact scenarios. We do not know if we will find friends, enemies, or something we cannot begin to categorize. Lisa returned to her console, diving back into her analysis of the ancient symbols with renewed intensity. Helen monitored the signal, tracking its every fluctuation and variation with careful attention to detail. Jake began running tactical scenarios, preparing the ship's defensive systems while hoping they would not be needed. The horizon's edge flew onward through the darkness, between stars, carrying humanity toward answers to questions they had been asking for 60 years. Toward a rendezvous with beings who had helped them once and then vanished without explanation, beings who were calling them now, reaching across light years with mathematics and hope. With signals that promised revelation and change, Foster watched the countdown timer on his command console. watching the hours tick away toward an encounter that would either validate humanity's greatest hope or confirm their deepest fears about being small and alone in an uncaring universe. Either way, nothing would be the same after today. The stars continued their eternal dance beyond the viewscreen, indifferent to human concerns, uncaring about the drama unfolding aboard one small ship in the vast emptiness of space. But somewhere ahead, something was waiting, something that remembered humanity and had chosen to reach out once more across the infinite dark. The alien vessel hung in space like a work of art carved from silver and light, its surface flowing with patterns that seemed organic rather than constructed, beautiful in ways that human engineering had never achieved and perhaps never would. Captain Daniel Foster felt his breath catch in his throat as the horizon's edge approached. Feeling small and primitive in comparison to the elegant ship before them, Ambassador Richard Hayes stood beside Foster on the bridge, his diplomatic credentials meaning little in a situation where humanity had no protocol, no established framework for communication with beings who had remained silent for 60 years. He adjusted his formal jacket nervously, fingers trembling slightly despite years of training in maintaining composure under pressure. "They are hailing us," Dr. Helen Carter announced, her voice tight with barely contained excitement and fear mixed together. Audio and visual transmission incoming on multiple frequencies. They are using our own communication standards, adapted perfectly to our technology. The viewscreen shifted, replacing the image of the alien vessel with faces that were hauntingly familiar, yet unmistakably other. The beings looking back at them had large eyes that reflected intelligence and kindness, skin that shimmered with subtle iridescence like pearls underwater, features arranged in ways that suggested both human familiarity and alien strangeness. "People of Earth," the central figure spoke, their voice melodic and clear, carrying harmonics that human vocal cords could never produce. "We are the Veltherans 60 of your years ago. We came to Mars when your colony faced extinction. We helped because we saw potential in your species, promise in your determination to reach beyond your world despite all obstacles." Foster stepped forward instinctively, though the gesture meant nothing across the communication link, though the Veltherans could not see him move closer to their image on the screen. Ambassador Hayes placed a restraining hand on his shoulder, reminding him silently that protocol mattered even in unprecedented situations. "I am Ambassador Richard Hayes, representing Earth and all human colonies," Hayes said, his diplomatic training finally overcoming his nervousness. "We have wondered about you for decades, searched for you across the stars, built entire research institutions dedicated to understanding the technology you left behind. Why did you leave without making contact? Why remain silent for so long only to call us now?" The Veltheran who had spoken first, whose name translated approximately to Matriarch Sirith in human phonetics, shifted her posture in a way that suggested deep emotion, regret, perhaps, or sadness at choices made long ago under different circumstances. Her large eyes seemed to hold millennia of wisdom and experience that humanity could barely imagine. "We left because you needed space to grow," Sirith explained, her words carrying weight beyond their simple meaning. "Species that receive too much help too quickly become dependent. They lose the drive to innovate and struggle and overcome that makes them truly strong. We gave you tools to survive, but we did not stay to solve all your problems, to become a crutch that would weaken you rather than strengthen your people." Dr. Lisa Martinez moved closer to the viewscreen, her years of studying Veltheran artifacts finally paying off in this moment of actual contact with their creators. She had theories about their motivations, hypotheses about why they helped humanity. But hearing the truth directly was something else entirely. "You were teaching us," Lisa said, her voice filled with sudden understanding. "The artifacts you left were not just emergency equipment. They were lessons. demonstrations of principles that we could study and learn from. Technology simple enough for us to understand, but advanced enough to push our development forward. Sirith's expression shifted into what might have been a smile, though the alien features made exact interpretation difficult. She nodded slowly, acknowledging Lisa's insight with what appeared to be approval and satisfaction that her intent had finally been recognized. "You understand correctly. Dion Martinez," Sirith said, somehow knowing Lisa's name despite no formal introductions having been made. "We have been watching humanity for a very long time. We saw you split the atom, reach your moon, send probes to distant planets, establish your first fragile colonies on Mars, and we saw the crisis coming before your people did. We knew the atmospheric processors would fail." Commander Jake Peterson frowned at that revelation, his military instincts immediately questioning how the Beltherans could have known about equipment failure before it happened, wondering what else they might know about human affairs. Foster noticed his second officer's reaction and shared the concern. Though he kept his expression neutral for diplomatic purposes, "We could have prevented the crisis entirely," Sirith continued, her tone carrying genuine regret. "We had the technology to repair your processors before they failed, the capability to ensure the disaster never happened, but that would have made you dependent on our constant intervention. It would have taught you to wait for rescue rather than to build better, to rely on us rather than yourselves." Ambassador Hayes absorbed this information with visible difficulty, struggling with the moral implications of allowing 10,000 people to nearly die in order to teach a lesson about self-reliance. His diplomatic mask slipped slightly, showing the human reaction beneath his professional exterior. "You let us suffer to make us stronger," Hayes said, his voice carrying an edge of accusation that he probably had not intended to reveal. "You had the power to prevent a tragedy, and you chose not to intervene until the last possible moment." The bridge crew watched in tense silence as Sirith considered the ambassador's words, her expression suggesting she had expected this reaction, perhaps even prepared for anger and resentment from the species she had helped in such a calculated manner. When she spoke again, her voice carried layers of complexity that simple translation could not fully capture. "We helped at the moment when help would save you without destroying your independence," she explained carefully. "Earlier intervention would have prevented growth, later intervention would have meant death. We walked the razor's edge between those outcomes, trying to give you what you needed without taking away what made you strong." Lieutenant Karen Walsh, the security chief who had been standing quietly at her station throughout the exchange, spoke up for the first time since the Veltherans made contact. Her question cut through the diplomatic discussion with practical directness. "Why are you here now?" she asked bluntly. 60 years of silence, and suddenly you reach out across space to contact us again. Something has changed. Something has happened that makes you willing to break your policy of non-interference. Sirith's expression darkened, her features shifting into something that looked unmistakably like fear, despite the alien arrangement of her face. She glanced to the sides, seeming to consult with other Veltherans who stood beyond the range of the visual transmission, conferring in quick musical phrases that the translation software could not process. "We need your help," Sirith said finally, the admission clearly difficult for a species accustomed to being helpers rather than those who sought aid. "There is a threat moving through this galactic sector. A force we call the Devourers. They consume entire civilizations, assimilating technology and destroying cultures, leaving nothing but empty worlds in their wake." Foster felt cold understanding settle over him as he grasped the implications of what Sirith was revealing. The Veltherans, with all their advanced technology and elegant ships, with all their wisdom and experience spanning millennia, were losing a war against something even more powerful. "You are part of a coalition," Lisa said, her analytical mind piecing together the larger picture from fragments of information. multiple species working together to resist the devourers. But conventional strategies are not working. Traditional approaches to warfare are failing against this enemy. Sirith nodded gravely, confirming Lisa's deduction with visible relief that humanity could grasp the situation quickly despite their relative youth as a spacefaring species. She gestured, and the view screen split, showing images of devastated worlds, burning cities, fleets of ships locked in desperate combat against vessels that seemed to shift and adapt with terrifying speed. "We are losing," Sirith admitted, her voice heavy with the weight of countless deaths. Billions of lives lost to an enemy that seemed unstoppable. Our coalition includes 17 species, each contributing their unique strengths, but the devourers learn from every engagement. They adapt to our tactics faster than we can develop new ones. They turn our own technology against us through methods we do not fully understand. Ambassador Hayes straightened, his diplomatic training reasserting itself as he began to understand why the Velthrans had come specifically to Earth, why they had chosen to contact humanity after decades of careful distance. There was only one reason advanced aliens would seek help from a species as young and limited as humans. "What can we possibly offer you?" Hayes asked, voicing the question that everyone on the bridge was thinking. "You have technology centuries beyond ours, ships that make our fastest vessels look like toys, weapons we can barely comprehend. What could humanity possibly contribute to a conflict on this scale?" Sirith's expression shifted again, this time into something that looked remarkably like hope despite her alien features. The Situation Room deep beneath Earth Command headquarters buzzed with tension as military leaders and civilian officials gathered to decide humanity's response to the Veltharan request. Admiral Christine Brooks stood at the head of the conference table, her silver hair and stern expression commanding immediate respect from everyone present despite the unprecedented nature of the crisis they faced. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Senator Margaret Cole said, her voice sharp with skepticism as she reviewed the reports transmitted from the horizon's edge. "Aliens we have never officially acknowledged contacted us asking for military assistance against an enemy that has defeated 17 advanced civilizations, and we are seriously considering saying yes." General Paul Andrews, his chest decorated with medals from 3 colonial conflicts, leaned back in his chair with arms crossed, his expression showing the careful calculation of a career military strategist weighing options and outcomes. He had spent 40 years preparing Earth's defenses against theoretical alien invasions, never imagining the first request would be for humanity to join an alien war. The Veltharans saved 10,000 lives on Mars, Dr. Lisa Martinez reminded the assembled officials, her presence at the meeting authorized specifically because of her expertise in Veltharan technology. "They helped us when we were helpless, gave us knowledge that advanced our development by decades. Asked for nothing in return, now they are asking for help, and we are debating whether they deserve it." Admiral Brooks raised her hand for silence, her authority cutting through the rising arguments before they could escalate into shouting matches. She had reviewed all available data during the flight back from the rendezvous point, studied every analysis, considered every angle with the thoroughness that had made her Earth's supreme military commander, Dr. Martinez. "Please explain again what you discovered about human capabilities," Brooks said calmly. "Why do the Velthrans believe we can contribute anything meaningful to this conflict?" Lisa stood, activating holographic displays that filled the air above the conference table with tactical simulations and comparative analyses. She had spent the entire journey back to Earth working on this presentation, assembling evidence that would convince skeptical officials that humanity had value beyond their obvious technological limitations. The Veltharan Coalition fights using advanced tactics based on mathematical optimization, Lisa explained, manipulating the holograms to show fleet movements and engagement patterns. Every species in their alliance approaches warfare as a problem, to be solved through superior technology and logical strategy. They calculate optimal firing solutions, position their ships according to proven formations, respond to enemy actions with predetermined countermeasures. General Andrews leaned forward, his military experience allowing him to see where Lisa's analysis was leading before she stated it explicitly. He had studied human military history extensively, understood what made Earth's warfare different from the theoretical approaches developed by species that had never fought among themselves. "They are predictable," Andrews said, finishing Lisa's thought. "Advanced and powerful, but ultimately predictable. The Devourers have learned to exploit that predictability, turning mathematical certainty into a weakness rather than a strength." Lisa nodded enthusiastically, grateful that someone grasped the implications without needing extensive explanation. She pulled up footage from human military exercises, showing Marines conducting guerrilla operations, special forces executing asymmetric warfare tactics, commanders improvising solutions to impossible situations with creativity born from desperate necessity. "Humans do not fight like that," she continued. "We grew up on Earth, a world that tried to kill us in 1,000 different ways: extreme weather, dangerous predators, diseases that evolved as fast as we could develop treatments, scarcity that forced us to do more with less. Every human carries the legacy of surviving the most hostile habitable planet in known space." Senator Cole studied the tactical displays with obvious confusion, unable to see how primitive human warfare tactics could matter against enemies, fielding technology centuries beyond Earth's current capabilities. Her expression showed polite skepticism mixed with growing impatience at what she clearly considered a waste of valuable deliberation time. "I fail to see how guerrilla tactics help against space combat," Cole said dismissively. "The Vulthrans have weapons that can destroy planets. What good are ambush tactics and improvisation against that kind of firepower?" Captain Daniel Foster, invited to attend the meeting despite his relatively junior rank, spoke up from his position near the back of the room. He had witnessed the Vulthran desperation firsthand, understood what Lisa was trying to communicate in ways that dry analysis could not capture. The Devourers adapt to conventional tactics faster than the Coalition can develop new ones, Foster explained. But adaptation requires prediction. If you cannot predict what your enemy will do, you cannot prepare effective countermeasures. Human tactical thinking is inherently unpredictable because we do not optimize for mathematical perfection. We improvise based on intuition and creativity, Dr. Henry Kim, the weapons development specialist who had spent his career reverse engineering Vulthuran technology from the Mars artifacts, added his own perspective to the discussion. He had been working on experimental systems that combined human innovation with alien principles, creating hybrid approaches that neither species would develop independently. "We have been developing adaptive weapon systems," Kim said, pulling up schematics for devices that looked more like living organisms than traditional military hardware. Mines that learn enemy movement patterns and change behavior. Drones that operate semi-autonomously using fuzzy logic instead of rigid programming. Defensive systems that randomize their responses to prevent pattern recognition. Admiral Brooks studied the weapon schematics with keen interest, her tactical mind immediately recognizing their potential value in the kind of adaptive warfare the Vulthrans described. She had authorized Kim's experimental programs, despite skepticism from traditional military thinkers, betting that unconventional approaches might someday prove valuable. "You are proposing we become tactical advisors," Brooks said slowly, piecing together the full scope of what humanity could offer. Not frontline combatants relying on superior firepower, but force multipliers who teach the Coalition how to fight unpredictably, how to use creativity as a weapon against enemies that have learned to counter every conventional approach. Lisa smiled. relieved that the Admiral understood what she had been trying to communicate through technical presentations and tactical analyses. The concept was simple once you grasped it. Humanity's weakness was their strength. Their limitations forced them to think differently. And different thinking was exactly what the Coalition needed. The Veltherans specifically requested human military advisors. Foster added, "They want us embedded with their forces, teaching our approach to warfare, showing them how to fight without relying solely on technological superiority. They believe we can change how the entire Coalition thinks about combat." General Andrews stood, walking to the holographic displays and manipulating them to show potential integration scenarios. His initial skepticism had transformed into professional interest as he considered the possibilities. Imagined what human tactical doctrine could accomplish when combined with Veltheran technology and resources. We would need guarantees. Andrews said firmly. Full partnership status in the Coalition. Access to their defensive technology to protect Earth and our colonies. Joint command authority rather than subordinate positions. If we are contributing our tactical expertise, we negotiate from a position of strength, not as supplicants begging for scraps. Senator Cole looked ready to object, to argue that humanity should focus on their own defense rather than joining alien wars. But Admiral Brooks cut her off with a raised hand and an expression that brooked no argument. The Admiral had made her decision, and her authority in military matters was absolute under current emergency protocols. I am recommending to the Global Council that we accept the Veltheran request, Brooks announced, her voice carrying the weight of command. But on our terms, full Coalition membership, technology sharing agreements, joint tactical command, and absolute authority for human advisors to implement their strategies without interference from species who think they know better. Lisa felt relief wash over her, knowing that her arguments had carried the day. That humanity would help repay the ancient debt while also securing their place among the stars. But she also felt the weight of responsibility settling onto her shoulders and the shoulders of everyone in the room. They were committing humanity to a war against an enemy that had defeated civilizations far more advanced than their own. We will need volunteers, Foster said quietly. Marines willing to embed with alien forces. Commanders ready to teach tactics to species that might not want to learn from primitive humans. Pilots prepared to fly missions where human creativity matters more than technological superiority. Admiral Brooks smiled grimly, her expression showing confidence in the fighting spirit of humanity despite their technological limitations. She had commanded humans in combat before, knew what they were capable of when properly motivated and given. Kepler Station hung in the void like a beacon of civilization against the infinite darkness. Its massive ring structure, spinning slowly to generate artificial gravity for the thousands of beings who lived and worked within its metal walls. The station served as a critical refueling point for Coalition vessels. A strategic asset that both sides understood could shift the balance of power in this entire sector. Captain Daniel Foster, now commanding a joint fleet of human and Veltheran vessels, watched the tactical display with growing concern as enemy signatures began appearing at the edge of sensor range. The Devourers were coming in force, their fleet composition suggesting they understood Kepler's importance and intended to take it regardless of cost. Enemy counted 47 vessels and climbing. Commander Jake Peterson reported from the tactical station, his voice steady despite the numbers that kept increasing with each sensor sweep. They are bringing 3 times the force we estimated. So our defensive plan assumed maybe 20 ships maximum. Lieutenant Karam Walsh stood at the security console, coordinating with the Marine detachment stationed throughout the fleet. She had spent the last 3 months training Veltheran ground forces in human close-quarters combat techniques, teaching aliens who had never fought hand-to-hand how to think like human soldiers, facing impossible odds. Station defense teams are in position, Walsh reported. But if the Devourers board us, the Veltherans are not ready for that kind of fighting. They understand the tactics intellectually, but they have not internalized the mindset, the willingness to fight dirty when elegant solutions fail. Veltheran Commander Ethrin, who shared command authority with Foster under the new coalition structure, studied the tactical display with visible distress. His species had fought the Devourers for decades, lost billions of lives across dozens of worlds, but never developed effective countermeasures to their adaptive tactics and overwhelming numbers. "We should fall back to the secondary defensive line," Ethrin said, his melodic voice tight with barely controlled fear. Standard coalition doctrine calls for tactical retreat. When facing numerical superiority of this magnitude, we preserve our forces for more favorable engagement circumstances. Foster had heard this argument dozens of times during the joint training exercises, encountered this mentality in every coalition species they had worked with over the past months. The aliens thought in terms of optimization and preservation, calculating acceptable losses and strategic withdrawals with mathematical precision that ignored the human concept of holding ground at all costs. "If we retreat, Kepler falls," Foster said firmly. "The Devourers take a critical strategic asset, gain a foothold in this sector that will take years to dislodge. Sometimes you have to stand and fight even when the numbers say you should run." Dr. Lisa Martinez, serving as diplomatic liaison and cultural advisor aboard Foster's flagship, moved closer to the command group, sensing the tension building between human and Veltheran approaches to the crisis. She had spent months studying coalition tactical doctrine, understanding why they fought the way they did and why it consistently failed against Devour adaptation. "Commander Ethrin, your people have been fighting defensively for decades," Lisa said gently. "Always retreating, always preserving forces, always waiting for optimal conditions that never come. The Devourers have learned to exploit that caution. They push you back system by system because you will not stand and bleed for ground that matters." Etherin's large eyes reflected inner turmoil as he struggled between generations of tactical training and the new human perspective that seemed reckless, but had shown surprising effectiveness in smaller engagements. He trusted Foster, had seen human tactical creativity work in situations where coalition doctrine failed, but this felt different, larger, more dangerous. "What do you propose?" Ethrin asked finally, his voice carrying resignation mixed with desperate hope. "How do humans suggest we fight when outnumbered 3-1 by an enemy that adapts to conventional tactics faster than we can deploy them?" Foster smiled, the expression carrying equal parts confidence and calculated risk as he manipulated the tactical display to show a plan that would seem insane to anyone trained in standard military doctrine. He had spent the entire journey to Kepler developing this strategy with his human officers, refining it through simulation after simulation until they had something that might actually work. "We fake a retreat," Foster explained, highlighting fleet movements on the holographic display. "Make it look convincing. Sell the Devourers on the idea that we are following standard coalition doctrine. Let them commit to pursuing what they think is a broken defensive formation." Jake leaned over the tactical plot, adding details to Foster's basic plan, filling in the specific movements and timing that would make the deception believable to an enemy that had learned to read coalition fleet behavior with terrifying accuracy. The plan required precise coordination and perfect timing. Any mistake would turn tactical brilliance into catastrophic disaster. "We position our fastest ships as bait," Jake continued. "They lead the Devour main force away from the station while appearing to flee in disarray. Meanwhile, our heavy hitters circle around using the station's mass to mask their approach, hitting the enemy command ship from an unexpected angle." Walsh added the ground component to the tactical plan, showing marine insertion points on the Devourer command vessel. She had been training for this exact scenario, practicing boarding actions against mock-ups of enemy ship designs, preparing human and Veltheran forces to fight together in the chaos of shipboard combat. While the fleet engages, I take a strike team aboard their command ship, Walsh said, a voice carrying the calm certainty of someone who had volunteered for a mission that might be suicide. We disable their coordination systems from inside, create confusion and communication breakdowns that prevent their adaptive responses from propagating across the fleet. Etherin stared at the tactical plan with an expression that human observers could not fully interpret. But his body language suggested profound discomfort with strategies that relied on deception and sacrifice rather than optimal positioning and calculated risk. His training screamed that this approach would lead to disaster, but his recent experience with human tactics suggested it might be the only chance they had. This plan requires us to appear defeated, Etherin said slowly. To show weakness and disorder when coalition doctrine demands we maintain formation integrity. Every instinct my people have developed over millennia of warfare says this will fail catastrophically. Foster understood the Veltheran commander's struggle. Knew he was asking Etherin to violate every principle his species held sacred about military conduct and tactical honor. But he also knew that honor and optimization had not stopped the Devourers, had not prevented the loss of 17 coalition worlds, had not saved billions of lives already consumed by an enemy that turned predictability into a weapon commander. I need you to trust me, Foster said quietly. Trust that human experience fighting on a death world taught us something valuable about survival against superior odds. Trust that appearing weak can be strength if your enemy believes the deception. The bridge fell silent as everyone waited for Etherin's decision, knowing that joint command meant either commander could veto tactical plans. That cooperation required consensus rather than unilateral authority. The seconds stretched into uncomfortable minutes as the Veltheran processed information and struggled with choices that went against everything his culture valued. How certain are you that this will work? Etherin asked finally. Foster met the alien's large eyes directly, refusing to offer false confidence or exaggerated probability assessments. Humans understood uncertainty in ways coalition species struggled with, accepted that sometimes you had to act without knowing outcomes. That calculated risk was still risk, no matter how carefully you planned. 30% chance of complete success, Foster admitted honestly. Maybe 50% that we hold the station with significant casualties. 20% that we are wiped out trying, but 100% certainty that standard coalition tactics will fail here. That retreat means we lose Kepler without even fighting for it. Etherin processed these numbers with visible difficulty. His species accustomed to tactical planning that sought 90% success probabilities before committing forces. But he had also seen what happened when the coalition waited for perfect conditions. Watched worlds burn while commanders calculated optimal engagement parameters that never materialized. I trust you, Etherin said finally, his voice carrying the weight of a decision that could doom his career if it failed or elevate him to legendary status if it succeeded. We will execute your plan. I will order my ships to follow human tactical command, to accept apparent disorder and weakness as strategic choices rather than failures of military discipline. Foster nodded his gratitude, knowing what this cost the Veltheran commander. Understanding the courage required to abandon everything his training taught him and place faith in human creativity. He turned to his crew, seeing determination on every human face despite the odds they faced. All ships, implement retreat protocol Beta 7, Foster ordered, his voice carrying across multiple communication channels to human and Veltheran vessels throughout the fleet. Make it look good. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Kepler Station. 6 months during which the entire galaxy seemed to shift on its axis as human tactical doctrine spread through coalition forces, like wildfire through dry grass. Admiral Daniel Foster stood in the observation deck of Earth's newest orbital facility, watching ships from 17 different species dock and depart with coordinated precision that would have seemed impossible just a year ago. The facility itself represented humanity's transformation from isolated newcomers to essential partners in the galactic community. Its design, incorporating Veltheran architectural principles with human engineering pragmatism, creating something neither species would have built alone but both could appreciate for its efficiency and beauty. Dr. Lisa Martinez entered the observation deck carrying data tablets and wearing the formal robes of her new position as Chief Coalition Historian, a role created specifically to document humanity's integration into galactic society and preserve the lessons being learned through cross-cultural military cooperation. She had aged noticeably in the past months, the weight of responsibility adding lines to her face that had not been there before. "The Council is ready for your report," Lisa said, settling into a seat beside Foster and gazing out at the orbital traffic with visible satisfaction. 17 species all waiting to hear how the human tactical integration program is progressing, how many more advisors we can provide, how quickly we can spread our approach to warfare across the entire coalition fleet. Foster smiled slightly, remembering when humanity had been the ones waiting anxiously for alien approval, seeking acceptance into a galactic community that barely acknowledged their existence. The reversal of positions felt surreal, even after months of experiencing it daily. Watching coalition commanders defer to human tactical expertise despite their technological superiority. "We have trained over 5,000 coalition officers in human tactical doctrine," Foster reported, reviewing his notes for the upcoming presentation. "Each one has returned to their species with new approaches to problem solving, new frameworks for thinking about adaptive warfare. The results have been extraordinary across every measurable parameter." Ambassador Richard Hayes joined them in the observation deck, his diplomatic credentials now extending far beyond Earth's interests include formal representation of human perspectives within coalition decision-making structures. He carried himself with confidence that had been absent during those first nervous encounters with the Veltherans, experience having replaced uncertainty with genuine authority. "The Council wants to expand the advisor program," Hayes said, settling into a third seat and pulling up holographic displays showing casualty statistics and tactical success rates. Coalition losses against the Devourers have dropped by 63% since we implemented human-inspired tactics. Worlds that would have fallen are holding their ground. Fleets that would have retreated are standing and fighting effectively. Lisa manipulated her data tablets to show cultural analysis reports, documenting how human integration had affected coalition species beyond purely military applications. The changes went deeper than tactics and strategy, touching fundamental assumptions about cooperation, innovation, and the value of diversity in approaches to common problems. "The Zereth were asking me about human education systems yesterday," Lisa said, highlighting a conversation with one of the Coalition's most advanced species. "They wanted to understand how we teach creative problem-solving to children, how we encourage questioning authority and challenging established methods, concepts that most Coalition species find uncomfortable but are beginning to recognize as valuable." Foster thought about the irony of the situation. How humanity had gone from being helped by advanced aliens to teaching those same aliens lessons about survival and adaptation. The Veltherans' ancient decision to help without creating dependency had shaped humanity in ways no one could have predicted, created a species that valued independence and creativity because they had been forced to develop those traits through struggle. Admiral Brooks sent new deployment orders. Hayes continued, pulling up strategic maps showing human advisors embedded with coalition forces across dozens of systems. We are stretched thin, working with species on every front against the Devourers. There is talk of establishing a permanent human tactical academy, training coalition officers in our methods on an institutional scale rather than through individual advisor assignments. The observation deck's comm system chimed, announcing an incoming transmission from Velthoran space. Foster accepted the connection, watching as Matriarch Cirith's familiar face appeared on the view screen, her expression carrying satisfaction and something that might have been pride despite the alien arrangement of her features. Admiral Foster, I wanted to inform you personally before the official announcement, Cirith said, her melodic voice carrying warmth that had been absent during their first contact months ago. The Coalition Council has voted unanimously to grant humanity full partnership status with SEAT. Rotation privileges your species will help lead the Coalition, not just serve within it. Foster felt the significance of the moment settling over him like a physical weight, understanding what this meant for Earth and all human colonies. They had gone from isolated and primitive to essential partners in less than a year. Earned respect through contribution rather than technology. Proved their value through creativity rather than firepower. Thank you, Matriarch, Foster said formally. We are honored by the Council's decision and committed to continuing our partnership with all Coalition species. Cirith's expression shifted slightly, taking on qualities that suggested deeper emotion beneath her diplomatic composure. She glanced to the sides as if checking that she was alone before continuing with something more personal than official announcements. I want you to understand something about what we did 60 years ago, Cirith said quietly. We had been watching humanity for centuries, studying your development, debating whether to make contact or remain hidden, and we saw something in your species that reminded us of ourselves when we were younger, more desperate, more willing to fight against impossible odds. Lisa leaned forward, her historian's instincts recognizing a moment of genuine revelation, understanding that Cirith was about to share something significant about Velthoran history and their reasons for helping humanity. She activated recording systems automatically, preserving whatever came next for future analysis and study. The Velthorans were not always an advanced species, Cirith continued, her voice carrying the weight of ancient memory. We faced extinction 3 times in our early history, survived only because other species helped us at critical moments, taught us, guided us, gave us tools to save ourselves without making us dependent on their constant intervention. Foster absorbed this information with surprise, having assumed the Velthorans achieved their current status through uninterrupted development, never considering they might have received help similar to what they later provided humanity. The revelation added layers of meaning to everything that had happened over the past months. We helped you because we remembered being helped, Cirith explained. Because we understood the value of assistance that empowers rather than enslaves, that teaches principles rather than providing solutions, and we stepped back because we knew from experience that species need space to develop their own character, their own unique approaches to problems. Hayes stood and moved closer to the view screen, his diplomatic training recognizing the profound nature of this conversation, understanding that Cirith was sharing information rarely disclosed to other species. The Velthorans had a reputation for wisdom and advancement, but apparently that wisdom was earned rather than inherent. You were testing us, Hayes said slowly. Not maliciously, but genuinely, you wanted to see what humanity would become if given help without interference. Whether we would develop the independence and creativity that you believed we were capable of achieving. Cirith nodded, acknowledging Hayes' insight with visible approval. She had clearly been waiting for humans to grasp this aspect of Velthoran intentions, hoping they would understand the deeper purpose behind actions that had seemed mysterious or even cruel when examined superficially. Every species in this coalition has unique strengths. Zereth said. The Zereth excel at theoretical science. The Korthians are unmatched at resource logistics. The Mandari create art that transcends cultural boundaries and humanity. We knew even before making contact. Would bring something equally valuable if allowed to develop it naturally. Lisa felt pieces clicking together in her mind as decades of research suddenly made sense in ways she had never quite grasped before. The Mars artifacts had been teaching tools, yes, but they were specifically designed to encourage certain types of thinking, to push humanity toward developing their creative problem-solving abilities rather than simply adopting Veltharan solutions. You shaped us, Lisa said, her voice carrying both wonder and a touch of concern. Not overtly, not through direct control, but through careful application of help at critical moments. You created the circumstances that would force us to develop the traits you knew the coalition would eventually need. Zereth's expression suggested complex emotions, perhaps guilt mixed.